Welcome in, everybody, to the Flagship podcast. I am Chip Brown of Horns 24/7, joined, as always, by our fearless leader, the managing editor of Horns 24/7, the one and only Taylor Estes. And Taylor, we are broadcasting after a disappointing third straight loss for Texas, in which they held a double-digit lead in the third quarter. And Texas this time has that happen in Waco, and they lose 31-24 to Baylor. And, each one of these losses to Oklahoma State, and now to Baylor have been a little bit different. The storyline has pretty much been the same, but against Oklahoma, Texas's offense certainly scored enough points, 48, to win the game. The defense gave out and gave up big chunk running plays. Against Oklahoma State, the offense, and Casey Thompson was part of the problem, throws a pick six, when trying to go build on a 17-3 lead, turns the momentum in the game. And then against Baylor, Texas is down by 3 points with 9:59 left to play after leading 21-10 in the third quarter. And Steve Sarkisian goes for a fake punt on 4th and 11 near midfield and gives Cameron Dicker, the punter, an option of, rugby punting or going for it. Cameron Dicker, I feel like Steve Sarkisian was pressing right there. It didn't need to do that.
Right.
Just punt. And then I felt Cameron Dicker was pressing. He wanted to try, just like Xavier Worthy trying to bring the kick return out of the end zone late against Oklahoma. Guys are
Don't try to be a hero,
They're trying to be a spark, and it ends up being, a complete fail. And this one gets away after that, because after the fake punt, Baylor only needed 3 plays to score another touchdown as part of a 21-0 run. And they go up by 10. Mm-hmm. And then Texas is scrambling to get back into the game. And it just feels like, everyone is trying to get rid of this nightmare ending, and it's backfiring. But I want to get your comments on that first. But I think there's some good news out there for Texas.
Yeah, I think, Chip, it's almost like right now, especially the last 2 games, I feel like there's never a point in either the Oklahoma State game or this Baylor game, especially like after the second quarter, where I thought the game was over. And you kind of felt that throughout the entire game against Baylor too. It's almost like Texas is on this like merry-go-round circus ride from hell, where it's like, it seems like, oh, it's about to slow down. It's about to start, be able to get off the merry-go-round. And then it just like kicks into like overdrive and starts spinning you like where you're holding on for dear life. And that's kind of what you're seeing right now, I feel like, with Texas. And again, I think you bring up a good point with maybe a little bit of pressing going on. I'm not sure if the right decision is to put put Cameron Dicker in a position where he can, make that fake punt, because that was the wrong move by him. Obviously, he had the option to do either there. But yeah, I mean, this is just, it's the one thing that the consistent is, it seems like Texas gets into a position where they're trying not to lose and they're not trying to win. And that's where, this is kind of the same story, different year a little bit for Texas. Has been that way for the last couple seasons. Even when there was a cushion lead, it was like, oh, let's take the foot off the gas a little bit and just hold steady. And it's not working out that way. And Texas doesn't really have, the difference makers, I think, across the board to do that. And that's what I think you're seeing a lot as these 3 straight losses. It's almost like they play it safe a little bit, and then they get a little worried and try to force plays that aren't there. And then, it's definitely not ending in Texas' favor right now.
Well, it was a nightmare. You mentioned the merry-go-round nightmare. It was a nightmare for Bijan Robinson. This was his worst game of the season, and it was because Baylor was absolutely committed, and they had the horsepower up front to put 8 and 9 men close to the line of scrimmage, and the speed at linebacker and nickel with Jalen Petrie to be able to bail if they had to, but they were not going to let Bijan Robinson beat them today. And They hold him to a season low 43 yards rushing.
Yeah,
And
2.5 yards per carry.
yeah, and I mean, he was hit in the backfield a lot. And after the game, he said, this was the closest I've heard him to saying, some frustration. He said our O line was having issues with what Baylor was executing. Um, they were in the backfield a lot, and I was
Mhm.
doing everything I could to get back to the line of scrimmage. So, credit Baylor. Steve Sarkisian acknowledged that Baylor was loading up to stop the run and threw it all over the place. And Casey Thompson opens the game 5 of 5 for 101 yards and 2 touchdowns, including, burning that Baylor defense, which was leaving receivers in one-on-one coverage with a 63-yard touchdown pass to Xavier Worthy. It was one of those weird situations again where Texas is up 14-10, but Baylor has run 13 more plays than Texas after the first quarter and held the ball for,
10 and a half minutes of the first
10 and
quarter.
a half minutes to
Mhm.
4.5 minutes of the first quarter. So, nonetheless, Texas leads 14-10. Casey Thompson ends up at halftime 12 of 16 passing, and he had an interception, but it went through the hands of Joshua Moore. And this is another situation, Taylor, where you mentioned, they don't have the playmakers. We talked all off season about how receiver and offensive line were the big concerns on offense, just in terms of the depth that
Mhm.
you had. I mean, thank God for Xavier Worthy, right?
Yeah,
Thank
seriously.
God this freshman has turned into a monster. He had over 100 yards receiving today because Jordan Whittington goes down. He's their best receiver on third down. And you're waiting for Joshua Moore, who has proven himself. He's made big plays in big games. But today, he drops a touchdown pass. He has a ball go through his hands that gets intercepted. And in fact, it happened
The
on the very
following.
next play.
Mhm.
And then he fumbles in the second quarter. And it was a tough call. There wasn't a good replay review. Texas is playing in these obscure games, so they don't have enough cameras to review. Texas actually had 3 weird plays that got reviewed, and all of them went in Baylor's favor. That fumble by Josh Moore, was he down? Was he not down? Then there was a running into the kicker. They said he tipped the ball. I couldn't see it. I don't know if you saw a replay. Um,
Yeah.
that
I will say that the tip, that was kind of a 50-50, and I do think that his knee was down because I full disclosure, Chip and Jeff covered the game in Waco. If you can tell by my voice, is not sounding very good because I've been under the weather a little bit, so I stayed back and watched it. But the TV angle did look like the ball barely came out. I'm not sure that they would have been able to, if they didn't call it a fumble, I don't know if they would reverse that call. The tip ball kind of did, but I think right now at this point with Texas leading the Big 12, any of those 50-50 calls that could go either way or no calls, they're not going to go in the way of the favor of Texas right now. And this Big 12 officials, I mean, they're making it very clear. And I hate when people blame officials. I'm not blaming officials for this loss in any way, shape, or form, but Texas is definitely getting the short end of the stick, we'll call it, a lot of these games, and I would not be surprised if that continues until they go to the SEC, honestly, Chip.
Yeah, the other weird call was on 3rd and 6. There was a 6-yard pass to Tyquan Thornton. It looked like it may have bounced,
Mhm.
and they called it a catch and upheld it as a catch, and that sustained a drive to a touchdown that Baylor, um, you know, it was part of that 21-0 run that Baylor went on to erase the 11-point lead that Texas had. But Taylor, the bottom line is Texas desperately needed its receivers to step up today because they knew that Baylor was going to load up to stop Bijan Robinson, which they did, and Casey Thompson was going to have to make plays in the passing game, which he did, but Josh Moore drops a touchdown pass. A ball goes through his hands that gets intercepted. And then Marcus Washington drops a couple of passes and doesn't go hard enough on a 50-50 ball that would have been a first down catch. In the drop, Taylor, I saw the replay. Casey Thompson's getting pressured, and this is at the end when they're trying to score to tie the game. And this would have been a 49-yard completion to the Baylor 20. And Marcus Washington has the ball in his hands, and as he's trying to secure the ball, it just comes out of his hands.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the broadcast team, they were talking about like, "Oh, that was a good play or pass breakup." It really wasn't a pass breakup. I was sitting there, I was like, "That's not a pass breakup, that's a drop." Like, I mean, the Baylor player was in very good position, but he didn't touch the ball. His arms were near in the vicinity of it, but he didn't touch it. I mean, that was a straight up drop, in my opinion, on Marcus Washington, and a key one, as you mentioned.
Right, because they would have had first down at the Baylor 20 with 2:03 left, down 7. And who knows?
Yeah.
Maybe, you certainly have a better chance of scoring a touchdown at that point than you do on 3rd and 10 back at back in your own end of the field. So they needed playmakers to step up and make plays at the receiver position, and it didn't happen today. And that, I mean, it did, but there were 4 big drops and a not very well, on a 50-50 ball, you got to go get it. And Marcus Washington, I felt like, he had 7 catches for 70 yards, and yet all we're going to talk about are the plays he didn't make.
Right.
And and I don't know who to be upset with. I don't know if I should be upset with Marcus Washington or his lack of development or the poor recruiting, because Marcus Washington is a junior who's been waiting his turn, and his turn is now. And this was a game that was very much a winnable game for Texas. Obviously, they were up 11 in the 3rd quarter. And when you need playmakers to step up and deliver and they don't, who do you get mad at?
Right. Yeah. And like, I know that, there's a lot of Texas fans in our message board that like don't want to hear this right now too, Chip, but can you even get mad at Sark and this staff right now too because of it? Because I mean, they haven't had the chance to get their guys in. I guess who you get mad at possibly is Andre Coleman, the receivers coach. He's been one of the consistent coaches that's been, on staff. Now, I don't think Andre Coleman had very much say in last year under Tom Herman. I think that Tom Herman vetoed a lot of the decision making at who to put on the field at receiver. So I'm going to give him a little bit of a pass there. But you're right, Marcus Washington's been on campus too long to not be developing in a way that you expect, a high rated 4-star player to develop when they come out of high school, like ranked that way. I mean, there's a lot of other players that are going elsewhere and are developing seems like much quicker than Texas. I don't know if that's just because of the turnaround, consistent turnaround. It seems like is the only consistency that this program has seen when it comes to coaching staffs or what. But there's something going on with the receivers that they aren't developing. And you make a really good point. I mean, right now, the best playmaker on this team essentially was a non-factor in this game. He was erased from this game. And if that happens, you have to have some dogs out there that are going to be like, okay, well, Bijan's carried us in so many of these games. He's the reason why, he's a big reason why the Texas offense has been very successful. And if you're not going to step up for that guy, then what are you doing? I
Yeah.
mean, what are
Yeah.
you doing?
It was a day where it was very clear who the playmakers were going to have to be. And the other point I would make, Taylor, is Steve Sarkisian's got to run Casey Thompson more by design,
Yes.
because look, that's going to help free up Bijan Robinson. When you have to account for the quarterback in the running game, it opens things up. It puts defenders in conflict. And I thought we might see that more. I mean, Casey had a 25-yard scramble late in the game. The guy can run, and he needs to run, because especially on a day like today where, the defense is just loaded up between the tackles to make sure that, and has the speed outside, thanks to guys like Jalen Petrie and Terrell Bernard to clip Texas's outside zone running scheme. Um, you need to be able to find yards some other way in the running game. And I just get the sense with Iowa State up next, another tough defense with a bunch of returning starters, although Iowa State lost today to West Virginia in Morgantown 38-31. I think you have to incorporate Casey Thompson more in the running game
Yeah.
to find a way to move the football on the ground on a day where the defense is selling out to stop the run.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Casey Thompson is viewed as more quote unquote athletic quarterback. I know that Steve Sarkisian's it's not necessarily his ideal style to have a running type of quarterback. And nobody's asking Casey Thompson to be a Sam Ellinger, even, I don't think. I mean, you're not expecting him to have to run to make this offense go like how Sam Ellinger did in a lot of games in his career, but he has the tools, he has the athletic ability. And I mean, you saw him even, I think it was in the first half, like, he had the Baylor defender on skates. I mean, he had like that one cut and he scrambled on I don't know if it was a design quarterback run or not, but I mean, he has the tools to be a weapon in the running game. And I 100% agree. I agree with you. I think that it's time to, let loose a little bit. And obviously playing a little bit, safe or maybe not utilizing some of those things because they may be outside their comfort zone. I mean, at what point now, Chip, what do you have to lose?
Right.
You got to see, you got to try to find a way to salvage the season. Texas still needs 2 wins to get bowl eligible. And you got to take some chances, I think, down the stretch. And I think that starts with opening up the quarterback running game too. I agree with you with that.
Well, Texas, the good news is Texas got off to another fast start. And
Is it a good news anymore?
well,
maybe
yeah,
it's bad news.
I think it's a sign that their scripted plays are working, that Steve Sarkisian knows how to get his offense going, get it into rhythm. And they had an awesome 14 play, 75-yard drive that took 6 minutes and 11 seconds off the clock to open the second half. And it was a thing of beauty. They needed a 4th and goal run with Keandre Coburn as Bijan Robinson's lead blocker to finish that drive off on Bijan Robinson's 1-yard touchdown run. And it's a good thing the refs didn't see Keandre Coburn just bear hugging Jalen Petrie on that play. But it was a great drive, clock eating drive. You're thinking, oh man, defense got to rest all through halftime, and then for 6 more minutes of game time, which we know is like 20, 25 minutes of actual time. And then Baylor goes on a 9-play, 75-yard drive that takes 4 minutes off the clock, and they convert let's see, is this sorry. This is where Baylor converts a 4th and 5 from the Texas 20. 4th and 5 from the Texas 20. Jerry Bohannon hits RJ Sneed on a crosser, and they get the first down and end up scoring a touchdown. That play was huge. 4th and 5, and Baylor clearly saw something that they felt like they could exploit, and it was RJ Sneed on a crossing route, and he makes the catch for 14 yards to the Texas 6, and 2 plays later, Gary Bohannon takes it in for a 6-yard touchdown run. But they're not playing complimentary football today. Special teams as good as Cameron Dicker was, because he had a 58-yard punt and he had a 42-yard punt that was downed at the Baylor 7. And whatever that punt, running into the punter was, because his punt went 34 yards
Right.
to the Baylor 20. But special teams, I just felt like Steve Sarkisian was pressing with the fake punt. Cameron Dicker, should have rugby punted that thing. I didn't see what he saw where he thought he could, from 15 yards back behind the line, run another, he would have had to run 26 yards in total, and he got
Yeah.
2.
Yeah. I mean, he would have to run a quarter of the football field essentially in order to get that. I don't know what he saw either. I mean, he essentially only gained what, a yard it would have been, I think,
Yeah,
or
2
something.
yards.
2 yards, yeah. So, yeah, I mean, it's you don't wanna see it, especially coming out of a bye week. You don't wanna see them or feel that the team is pressing, and that's exactly what you saw. Chip, I have a question for you, and I'm gonna preface this with we did not discuss this at all prior to the show, and I know that it's a little bit different today because Baylor did a really good job of being in the backfield, really eliminating Bijan Robinson out of the game plan. However, Chip, you go back to that TCU game where even though there wasn't, Bijan, there was a couple plays where he was only getting a couple yards, they still kept giving him the ball. Following that, Gary Patterson questioned Bijan having that many carries in a game, having 35 carries in a game. Do you think that has shaken Steve Sarkisian a little bit? The questions of if they were overutilizing Bijan Robinson or putting too much of a workload on him being a young running back, because you haven't seen Bijan be as involved, especially later in games since that TCU game.
I don't think so.
Mhm.
I think they would, Steve Sarkisian's MO has always been, if he has a stud running back that, he runs them
Right.
every step of the way.
Do you
I
feel that
know.
he is running him as much as he should be though?
Well, I do, but I think they have to be more creative. And,
Mhm.
they ran Bijan on first down against Oklahoma State late in the game, and he was getting 1 yard and 0 yards. And, they were predictable. And
Right.
so when they would run Bijan, it wasn't effective. And you can't just rely on him to make everybody miss, but
Right.
you still have to find ways to, get him involved, whether it's the passing game or jet sweeps or whatever it is, counter plays. He loves the counter play. Um, and they mix it up. They run the outside zone. They run power plays with Cade Brewer as the lead blocker. Um, but yeah, 17 carries for 43 yards today. He had the 1 yard touchdown run, 2.5 yards per carry, his worst production of the season. And so, that's on Steve Sarkisian and this offensive line. I mean, obviously you want to see the offensive line get better. They had 2 penalties today. Texas only had 4 penalties. 2 of them were on the offensive line for false starts. One was, again, early in the game. Texas couldn't overcome it. In fact, Casey Thompson got sacked on a delayed blitz right after the false start. And that drive it was Texas's second possession and went nowhere. But Dicker had a 58-yard punt that helped get him out of a bad situation there. And, I look over at what Baylor was doing. Texas defense gave up 199 yards rushing on 42 carries, 4.7 yards per carry. 69 of those came in the fourth quarter, including a 32-yard touchdown run. So, this defense, and they're rotating a lot of guys. I mean, you'll see a lot of Keandre Coburn and Moro Jomo in there, and you'll see a lot of, Byron Murphy and Tavondre Sweat in there with Alfred Collins. Alfred Collins made some plays today. Let me get to the positive, okay, Taylor, because I do think this Texas team is close,
Mhm.
and I do think that they still believe in each other and in this coaching staff. I think they're, I used to hate it when Mac Brown would say this. They're trying too hard. I
Mhm.
think we've had some guys try to be heroes, and it's cost Texas. I think Steve Sarkisian, with that fake punt, was pressing when he didn't need to be pressing. It led to Cameron Dicker pressing. But I think Casey Thompson is playing well enough and has played well enough in 2 of the 3 losses to win the game. I thought he played well enough today to win the game. And I think Xavier Worthy's a stud. And the defense forced 2 more turnovers today. Gary Bohannon, I guess is how it's pronounced, spelled Jerry. But Gary Bohannon had 1 interception coming into the game, and Texas intercepted him twice. One, by BJ Foster, set up a touchdown for
the
Texas.
first touchdown of the game. Yeah.
So the defense is coming up with turnovers, and yes, they're giving up too many yards between the 20s. They gave up a 4th and 5 at their 20 that led to a touchdown, but they're close, and they need playmakers to step up. They need Marcus Washington to step up. If not, then bring on Kelvontae Dixon. Let's see what he's got. If not, bring on Casey Kane, because we're at that point now where we got to see if other guys have that ability to make the play when their team needs it, because now you're going on the road to Ames, Iowa, to play an angry Cyclones football team that just lost at Morgantown with another defense loaded with a bunch of returning starters who love to play against Texas and Ames.
Yeah. Yeah, no doubt about it. And you're right. And Josh Moore, I think, has to be thrown in the mix too. If you got to step up as well. I mean, I know he did have the first touchdown, and he's been up and down, and he's had some really big and key plays, but he's too veteran for us to be talking about this right now, and I think he's deserved the benefit of the doubt. I do think that, until this offensive line, I know there's some people that may want to see Hudson Card right now, Chip. But until this offensive line gets better, it's not going to matter what quarterback is in. I mean, it's really not. And what we've seen from Hudson Card, earlier, obviously in the year, I'm not sure that he's the right one to be back there behind this offensive line after that Arkansas game. And I don't know. And I know that some people are going to disagree. I don't know what you do at this point, because if the offensive line continues to play this way, it's not going to matter who the quarterback is. They're going to have to just be used to having guys in their face. And right now, Casey Thompson has shown, a better ability of being able to handle that and being able to, take hits and not get rattled so quickly, like how Hudson Card struggled in Arkansas. So there's definitely a lot to work with. And I think, this is what comes with, a first year coaching staff and, changes in schemes. I do think that the one thing I'll give the defense credit for too is late in the game, they put the Texas offense in a position to win the game, with getting that late fourth quarter stop and giving the ball back to the offense with, what was it, like 4 minutes, I think, or something left in the game. So they did what they needed to do down the stretch, but you're right, they are getting gashed between the 20s. They're still doing a decent job, at least in the red zone. So that's something, I guess, that's a little bit better. I do feel like it was a more fundamentally sound defensive performance today. And for the most part, obviously there's always going to be misses. I mean, it's just, there's no football team in the history of any level of football that's played a perfect game. So there's going to be, some guys you can probably point to, but I do feel like the defense is getting better, and at least in putting the offense in a position to win the game right now. And the offense just has to answer. And the playmakers, the skill players, especially, they've got to answer.
I think there's a shortage of leadership on defense, from either vocal leadership or sideline leadership or what. I mean, Pete Kwiatkowski's in the press box during games, and he's not a real fiery guy anyway. The guy on the sideline is Jeff Choate, the co-defensive coordinator, who is fiery. And look, they need leadership, but I do see young players emerging.
Yeah.
I mean, Byron Murphy is going to be a star on the defensive line. Alfred Collins should already be your best defensive player, but he's making plays every game now. He forced a fumble today that Baylor recovered, but it resulted in a 3-yard loss. And he's making plays. And, Jalen Ford, God bless him, he was in position to make a play. He overran it, ended up getting gashed for a 20-yard run, and Jaron Thompson had a big play on 4th and 1. I want to give him credit for this because it was almost the exact same play that he had against Oklahoma, where he had Caleb Williams 2 yards behind the line, dead to rights, missed him, and it turns into a 66-yard touchdown run. Today, he, on 4th and 1, made the play for a 2-yard loss. Some other plays, got away from the secondary from he and BJ Foster, but a lot of times it was because gaps were missed in front of them, and then they were having to scramble with a bad angle. But I do feel like this defense is getting closer. They didn't get gashed in the running game until after the failed fake punt when they gave up the 32-yard touchdown run. So I'm gonna be positive there.
Yeah.
And I do like Darian Dunn. I
was gonna say I do too. He just absolutely leveled or laid the hammer on that guy.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
And
You're
then
not gonna question if he's gonna hit you hard, I think.
offensively, I trust Sarkisian to script the first half, and the first drive of the second half was fantastic. As I mentioned, they've got to find a way to instill confidence in these players in the fourth quarter, and the coaches have to put them in position, but then the players have to deliver. And today, the coaches tried a little too hard to put them in position with the fake punt call, not the right call. And Marcus Washington, God bless him, had a chance to be the hero with what would have been a 49-yard catch to the Baylor 20 with 2 minutes left. And it's in his hands. He's like going to secure the ball, and he comes out of his hands. I don't know what happened there. So I think you got Casey Thompson's making his 6th start in this game.
Yes.
So, I'm not ready to pull the plug on Casey Thompson. I think he played well enough to win today. But Steve Sarkisian is going to have to run Casey Thompson more to open things up for Bijan Robinson.
Yeah, I totally agree. You got to have more than just one guy back there. And especially going against the next game in Iowa State. I mean, Iowa State's defense isn't some scrubs. I mean, they've been playing pretty well. I know that the team itself has not, lived up to the hype I think that they expected Iowa State to be this year. But still, I mean, this is another tough challenge on the road. And yeah, I mean, they've got to find ways to get the yards, if it's not handing it off to number 5.
Yeah, if I'm a recruit right now, a receiver or an offensive line recruit, I'm going to Texas because I know I can play.
Yeah, exactly. That
I'm
is
playing
very
immediately.
true. Yeah. Yeah, I'm
I can
jumping
be
in the
starting.
transfer portal if I'm at another school and way behind on the offensive line because, I mean, whoever comes got to be better than what you're seeing right now.
All right, folks. Thanks for spending some time with us. There is a little bit of light, I think, at the end of the tunnel. I walked out of McLean Stadium feeling like Texas is going to go to Ames and win next week, and I probably shouldn't be predicting Texas to win any more games until they show me they can finish one. But I think this team believes in each other still, believes in the coaching, and they just got to learn how to be the man because they just don't have a lot of proven leadership, vocal leadership on this roster right now, which is a little surprising with all those guys on defense who transferred in from LSU, Alabama, Notre Dame, and they're making some plays, but not enough. So until next time, which will be Monday, for Taylor Estes, I am Chip Brown. Thanks for listening to the Flagship podcast. Make sure you're subscribed to the Horns 24/7 YouTube channel, and that you're an annual member of Horns 24/7, so you get all the premium content from all the sites on the preeminent college football and basketball network, 24/7 Sports. Thanks again, everybody, for listening. Stay safe and keep the faith.